Hi, Mark here from Excel, and a red wine tasting of one of the wines about which we as a company get most excited each year, particularly when the Decanter World Wine Awards come out, because it scores remarkably highly year in, year out. It's also a truly glorious wine, sumptuous, tasty, but got something rather special to it, which is always quite difficult to define. Now, I'm not going to put every detail about this wine in this tasting. It will be 20 minutes long. You don't want to watch it that long. I don't want to speak for that long. But it is, give or take, a 100% Syrah from Languedoc, but from one of the so-called cru appellations of that region, being from Pic St Loup in the hills high above Montpellier. It's from producer Guillaume Viau and his outfit, Bergerie du Capucin, and it's a pretty stunning wine. When you think Syrah in France, you think Northern Rhone. When you think Shiraz or Syrah across the world, you maybe think Barossa and South Australia, you may think South Africa to some extent. You don't always think Languedoc, and that's because quite a lot of red wines, if not a high proportion of red wines that come out of Languedoc, are pretty ordinary. A lot of Carignan thrown into them, some GSM blends which are quite ropily made, but Guillaume's wines are, I think, of the utmost class, and this is his flagship. It's a truly stunning one. And I think what I find fascinating about it is, well, one, I'm a Syrah fan. I think Syrah done well is a truly brilliant red wine. The difficult thing is it's very difficult to get Syrah or Shiraz, but normally in its Syrah guys, quite right. Push it a little bit too far, take it a bit too ripe, loses its acidity, the tannins crack, and you don't get that ability for it to develop. And push it a little bit too little, don't quite get it right, and it can be quite austere. It'll take 15, 20 years for the tannins to crack and become really attractive. Really difficult to get a wine that sits, I would say, between some of the austerity of many of the greats of the Northern Rhone, the Hermitages, the Saint-Josephs, the Cornasses, the Gros Hermitages, and the immediacy and the warmth that you get from the New World, particularly from Australia. Well, what I particularly like about the Bergerie du Capucin Larmanela, of course that's the name of the wine, is that it treads that gap. And what you get here is you get a quality and a finesse and an elegance which is very Northern Rhone, but you get a warmth to it which is very much a sort of New World wine. I discussed this with Guillaume, the proprietor, the winemaker today. I think he laughs a little bit at the description of it being slightly New World. I think it's fair to say that Guillaume and Bergerie du Capucin are very French, but there is something a little bit more innovative, a little bit more dynamic in the way that Guillaume produces his wines. I'm not going to go too much more into that now. As I say, have a look at the story I've written about this wine. But just to taste it, on the nose, the fragrance of it, I mean, there's many good things about this wine, but the sheer bouquet fragrance, aroma of it is extremely heady. One of the things that's quite unusual about it, and it's particularly pronounced in this vintage compared with the vintages before, is it's got a real cassis blackcurrant hit to it. Really dark little berries, if you see what I mean. It's a almost sort of blackcurrant cheesecake, cassis, creme de cassis kind of style to it. And normally you think cassis is quite a characteristic of Cabernet Sauvignon in particular. But with it, really big, sort of very ripe brambles, hedgerow fruits, fruits of the forest, that whole sort of mix to it. It's a really heady nose. There's a bit of oak there. Not at all overt, not particularly overt. There's a little bit of vanilla in there. But that, of glasses of red wine you might run into, is absolutely huge. Really big nose to it. Really fragrant. And sometimes I'm a little bit reticent when I get a nose that big, because very often noses, aromas like that come from wines which then don't quite deliver on it, which often come from slightly cooler years, which helps those aromas be developed, but then you go for a mouthful and actually it lacks some of that punch. Well, it's not lacking punch, not lacking delivery. There is a finesse and an elegance to it. The acidity on it is marked, is perhaps too strong a word, because it suggests it's really quite prevalent, quite prominent, and it's not. But there is a freshness to this. And year in, year out, when the Decanter World Wine Awards describe this wine, they describe this sense of sort of altitude freshness to it, and it really has that. There is a cleanliness and elegance to it, which I think is very much driven by the altitude. The acidity, there's a bite to it, which makes it definitely refreshing and redolent, I would say, of good Hermitage, of good Cornas. But there is a ripeness to it, and this is the thing that really stands out. There is a real fruit concentration to that. It's got really soft, plush tannins. It's not at all grippy, and I think it's absolutely glorious in the mouth. All of those fruits I described on the nose, they're right there. Tannins are good, acidity's good. There's a great structure to it. In terms of aging and, if you like, when should you drink this? I had this same conversation with Guillaume earlier today, and his view is that it's at its best about 5 years from vintage, so probably 2023 in this particular case. But he takes the view also that it is brilliant and easy to drink now, and I totally agree with that. I think this is a wine you can and probably should drink now. I can see, and especially having tried previous vintages as they've aged, it does become, it does develop. I think up to 10 years, I think this in 2028 will still be a great wine. I think probably compared with Rhone, Syrah, it sort of develops at 2 years for every one, if you see what I mean. If you think a Rhone Syrah might last for 20 years from vintage, this probably does 10. And I think it progresses and ages that bit more quickly, partly because the acidity is a little lower, partly because the tannins, I think, are that bit softer and plush and don't need to crack. It's a really glorious glass of wine with, I think, meat stuffs, but as a glass on its own, it's absolutely great. I was a bit reticent about opening and trying this. I only opened it yesterday. You'll see, it's all gone. Every time I go and open the new vintage of this, I think, is it going to deliver it as well? It was so good last year, and last year was very concentrated, very hot vintage 2017. Very concentrated, very powerful. Is this going to do as well? I think this is even better. The freshness, the zing to this is really exciting, and I just think it keeps getting better. So well done, Guillaume. Well done, Bergerie Capucin. And look, if you're going to spend £25 on a Syrah from anywhere, do it here. You can spend double that on a good Cornas, and you probably won't get anything quite as approachable and quite as lovely. So yeah, I mean, if you don't drink it, I certainly will.